for coming. So I'd like to ask everyone to silence your cell phones. We also have, part of the event will be questions sourced from the audience. So we have some note cards and pens here. If you had any questions you'd like to ask of the candidates, please provide them to, I believe, Craig, right there in the back, and he will pass them to me as we go. We have a few questions, you know, the standard questions, introductions, and some of the big questions that are on everyone's mind lately. We'll start with those, and then we will move on to allowing the residents to ask questions. For the candidates, yes.
Can I get a pen?
Yes. We have a few over here. For the candidates, we're giving you 2 minutes per question. We don't want you to feel rushed. So every answer you can use up to 2 minutes. If you don't use 2, that's fine. Just pass the mic to the next one.
Will you be throwing things at us?
Yes, we have a stock of tomatoes in the back.
Okay.
And if we, just to get started, we will ask you guys to give you a 2-minute introduction of yourself. We'll start with our candidate for mayor.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, my name is Justin Brooks. I've been an Erie resident for the past 13 years. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. I spent about 10 years in the Houston, Texas area going to college and working at Johnson Space Center. I really enjoy living in Erie. Brought my family here with me in 2009. We've raised 4 children here, all who go to Erie, and now one child goes to Nightblock High Schools. My favorite thing about Erie is the sense of community. We are still a small town, though it's relatively growing like crazy. And I think that by bringing a little bit of balance to the growth that we have, creating a way for us to have a more sustainable sense of community, and for us to create a pathway for the small businesses in town to be sustaining and improve this growth is a key objective over the next few years. It's going to be critical for us to be able to retain the sense of community that we have and the sense of pride that we take in Erie. To keep that going, it's going to require some sensible sustainability approaches. So I'm very happy to be here to answer your questions. I'm eager to hear what you have to say. So please, nothing's off limits. I really appreciate you guys taking the time on a beautiful Saturday to talk with us. Let's get going.
Hi there, I'm Baer. I'm running for trustee, and my family and I have lived in Colorado for the last 22 years. We moved to Erie, we moved to Louisville and then Superior for 16 years. We moved to Erie about 5-6 years ago. And I am the current chairman of the board for the Front Range Center for Assault Prevention. I've served on that board for the last 17 years. I'm also on the board for Logic, which is the League of Oil and Gas Impacted Coloradans. It's important to me to be building a culture in Erie where people feel safe, seen, heard, and respected, and we're able to engage with our community. I think that's foundational for moving our community forward from an economy point of view, where we are engaged in really truly understanding what our business owners need, and then as far as a community and making sure that people feel engaged and that they can come to the town with their needs and we can understand the best ways to meet their needs. We love living in Erie. We have 4 kiddos, 2 college graduates, and then a high school sophomore and a 5th grader. And so, you know, this is our home and our community, and I really hope that I can earn your vote and continue my investment in the community.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Christiaan van Woudenberg. I'm running for re-election as trustee. I've been in Erie for 15 years now and seen Erie grow from about 20,000 now to over 30,000 folks. Back when I moved in, there was just a stop sign at Sheridan and State Highway 7, and now it's a burgeoning commercial corner. And the change in Erie that we've seen over these last 15 years is really indicative to me of what the next 15 years will look like. That we're going to add another 10 or 20,000 folks to Erie's population, and we owe it to ourselves to do that in a smart and managed and controlled way so that we maintain our access to services like police and fire and schools and roads and water and sewer. It's been such a privilege for me to be a public servant over the last 4 years. And that's really what I want to underscore in my goals for the next 4 years, is to serve the community of Erie, to make sure that we take projects like the town center, which is going to add a whole bunch of mixed-use commercial, entertainment, and eating options to adjacent downtown, while we continue our investment in downtown Erie, like we did with bringing Birdhouse and Baripi and 105 Wells here with the Erie Social Club to the mix. The history of my relationship with town staff, the other members of the board, elected officials in neighboring communities has been so important for me to represent Erie, not only at the municipal level, but at the state, when I go to testify at hearings, whether it's on topics of oil and gas or the climate change. I'm really looking forward to representing Erie as a community to fulfill a vision for Erie, and I think we all hold that Erie is a special place. It's not like Lafayette or Louisville or Superior, that it's a unique place in the Front Range, and I want to continue that as we move forward as a community. Thank you.
My name is Hoback. I'm a candidate for trustee. I've been in Erie for 20 years. My family moved from Albuquerque to Boulder when I was 11, so I've been in Colorado and the Boulder area for the vast majority of my life. I've seen the good and the bad growth in Boulder as well as here. When I moved to Boulder, I was a dirt road, so again, how those things happen, I can learn from some of those events and apply them appropriately to Erie. Like Christiaan, I understand that the growth is going to happen. You can't really put a barrier up to all the growth. We need to make sure that it happens in a smart way. And I agree with Brian, being supportive of the current board and the path that we've been taking. There are a lot of plans in place with town center and progress of 9 Mile, and all these different projects that are ongoing. And I want to support that and bring continuity to the town. As a result of my 20 years here, I've been involved in the schools. My daughter graduated from junior high in 2018 after starting in kindergarten here. My son will graduate this spring, also started in kindergarten, so 2 K-12 in the town. I've been on the HOA boards, and I'm currently on the planning commission. So learning how the town works and meeting town staff, and that's why I want to run as trustee. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. I guess for the first question then, we had some source from our online sign-up form, and one that kept popping up was the home rule question. So that is one of the things that a lot of people have been considering, and so we wanted to ask you, what do you see as the positives of home rule? What do you see as the negatives? And do you support the proposition going forward? We'll start at this end this time.
Quite a while I was on the fence regarding home rule, but that's because I didn't really understand it. The only downside that I see to it is it'll take some time and education to get there. Actually, having home rule, I don't know of any compelling downsides to bring up. On the pro side, it gives our residents the opportunity to become more involved and write our charter and define our rules. How do we want Erie to look from a legislative standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint, and charter? It gives us a bit more leeway in terms of when we grow and have new types of entities like hotels or if the town hotels. It gives us options to have a bit of benefit from that taxation. So I think there are a number of benefits, and the time that it takes to get there, no compelling downsides.
So at the latest, 93% of Colorado residents live in a home rule municipality. And as I've been out in the neighborhoods talking to people about home rule, most of the people that moved to Erie moved from a municipality in Colorado that was also under home rule. So it's something that most Erie residents that move here are already used to. In terms of the process of home rule, it's a legislative process. It takes a couple of years to get it done properly. As Dan mentioned, there's a lot of education involved. I don't know if any of you were able to answer the home rule survey that was sent out in January, but the results from that survey that were presented at the Board of Trustees in early February were really encouraging. That, as Dan mentioned, the issue that we're really combating right now is ignorance, that people don't know what home rule means. And if we can educate the public, engage vigorously, I think we have an opportunity to really chart out Erie's future as a municipality and really embrace those things that make Erie unique. Stand on the shoulders of other municipalities like Loveland and Eagle and Castle Pines, who've recently gone through home rule, and take the best of all of those charters and write something with the Home Rule Charter Commission, which is 9 to 20 members of Erie's residents that can really decide for the next 20 years, 50 years, what does Erie want to be when it grows up? And the only real negative there is if there are Charter Commission members that get on and end up contributing and putting forth a bad home rule charter. That's a risk. So that's why it's so key for us to have a vigorous public engagement process to tell people what home rule means and to encourage community leaders, not people that are already elected to the Board of Trustees, to become a part of that Home Rule Charter Commission, to take care of that charter and do a really great job of writing it.
Yeah, I agree with what Dan and Christiaan have said. I've been talking to a lot of people in neighborhoods, and home rule is something that comes up. I've also been talking with my husband about home rule, and he's like, you need to make this more exciting because home rule is kind of like taxes, blah, blah. Like, not very, nobody knows what home rule means. And that's what I'm finding when I'm at doors too, is people saying, are you hearing about home rule? What does this mean? So yes, we have to have a vigorous education engagement with the community to make sure that we understand how important this is for Erie. And I think it's time. I am in favor of going to home rule. So, step one is that we're going to put it on the ballot. Do you want to go? Well, step one is the education that will happen before the ballots come out in November. But then, do you want to go to home rule? Do you want to elect these people to the commission? Those people will work with a consultant to write a charter that reflects the things that are important to Erie, and then that charter comes to the voters. Do you as voters like this charter? Yes. And then our government is dissolved, we become a home rule municipality, and we re-elect new people in the mayor and the council member seats. Or the voters don't like it. So it goes back to the commission and they have to write a new charter again. So I think it's really an important way to give power back to the people of Erie so that we can reflect and mature into some really exciting growth that's ahead of us, like maybe having a hotel in town because we don't collect our own taxes and the state doesn't collect a lodging tax. So in order to be able to offset the impacts that having a hotel in town would create for us, we need to be able to collect a lodging tax. And going home rule would create that opportunity for us. So it's not very exciting, taxes, blah, blah, but it is a really important state.
So there's not a whole lot left. I believe that what the other candidate shared here was very true. The home rule is a process. It's not a mandate that comes from the elected officials here. It is a plea to the public to advocate for what you want the home rule commission to say. Advocate and vote for the commissioners that you wish to have write the charter. It is really a reflection of the voters' authority over what is best for you. As the state was founded, every town, every municipality was established as a statutory town. Usually when they approach around 2,000 people, when they exit being a small farm town on a whistle stop for a train, they decided that we want to have a little more local control, meaning voter control for our municipality. We want to determine what is best for us. I am not a believer that someone at the State House or Senate that speaks for what's specific for Grand Junction or for Collins or Auld or Henderson really has the best interest or even an understanding of what is best for Erie. The best people to speak for what is best for Erie are Erie residents and Erie voters. And so that to me is what the home rule charter is most about, is creating a way and a voice for the voters to decide what is the best structure of government. Do you want to have term limits? Do you want to have, what size of government do you want to have? Do you want to allow for variance on state law? 80% of people surveyed in a recent town survey says they would like the recreational marijuana moratorium to expire. Okay, well if you allow that to expire, 80% of people, 10% more people, said that they wanted to collect an excise tax on that to defray the cost of additional policing and additional strain on the town infrastructure. Well, you cannot collect excise taxes if you are a statutory tax. So bad news, moratorium will expire, we will have these facilities in our town, but we will not be able to defray the additional cost of having those facilities. The taxes will be collected at the state, and then we'll get a portion of the sales taxes, but the excise taxes will not be possible. That's just one example. Rental car companies, should we get a desk in town, the rental car companies have additional burden, excise taxes will be collected. We're working to have a hotel put in the town center development that's going on, the Four Corners, right in the center of Erie. Excise taxes not allowed if you're statutory. So those are just some examples. Also, if you want to have variants of state law that's more restrictive because we as voters think they should be, as a statutory, as a home rule municipality, you have the authority to create variants on state law. You can't go less restrictive than what the state is. But if you say, hey, the state will allow recreational marijuana within, let's say, 2,000 feet of schools, but we say for Erie, we think that's too close, our schools are pretty close, we want these types of businesses to be in this part of town, we want to increase or modify that setback, we'll have the authority to say that as voters. So it's really about voters. The current elected officials, as we said before, we don't serve on the home rule commission. We don't control the home rule commission. They are a quasi-judicial board. They are actually elected by you. You pick the subset of people on the ballot that you want to represent you, and then you require that they represent your interest. I expect there to be public involvement. I expect that the result of that will go to the voters because it has to. It's changing the government. Any new tax that is proposed ever is required to go to a vote of the people. That's what the Taxpayer Bill of Rights table is all about. So people who will have you believe that it's a power grab by existing officials, or if it's a pathway to raise your taxes, neither of those are possible for that. Thank you.
Sorry, I lost track of time. All right, so the next question we have from the community was regarding oil and gas operations. That's a big topic around town. So as trustees and as mayor, what would you do to protect health and safety of residents around oil and gas operations? Start here.
So I started as an anti-oil and gas activist because there was a fracking operation that happened 800 feet north of my home. I am a directly impacted resident. I know what oil and gas does. However, I drove an internal combustion-based car to this event. I firmly believe in a just and equitable transition to a renewables future, and that means taking all of those hardworking folks that have brought us energy independence and transitioning them out of the oil and gas industry and into other industries. The opportunities for renewables are amazing. Locally, we've worked really hard since the passage of SB 19-181 to use our land use authority as a municipality to create regulations that really do as much as we can to protect the health and safety of residents. That currently it is required if an oil and gas operator wants to come to town, those operations must be conducted in a heavy industrial zone. Currently, the town does not have any parcel that is zoned for heavy industrial. So the first part of any new oil and gas development that might want to come to Erie would be a process whereby that land would have to be rezoned to heavy industrial. So those are some of the things that we've put in place. We've also had now a 3-year contract with air quality monitoring, both with Boulder Air and Ajax Analytics, to look at air quality. I have testified quite often recently at the state to get air quality monitoring and enforcement bills at the state, because we as a municipality shouldn't have to pay for that. And also to encourage developers in town to start building electric-only developments so that we're not spending any more money to propagate fossil fuel infrastructure into our homes, and that we can aggressively move toward our goals to address the climate crisis.
So my civic engagement began around oil and gas when my family was impacted because of a fracking well that was near our house. At that time, Senate Bill 181 was being debated in the House and Senate committees, and I testified at both at the Capitol. And then once Senate Bill 181 was signed into law, I engaged in Erie with my neighbors and impacted residents, town staff, and local elected officials as we redrafted Erie's Article 12, which is our own oil and gas regulations. It was important to me that we were putting legally defensible regulations in there to make sure that we have built in the most protected regulations that we can to protect the people and residents in Erie in our neighborhoods. And so I will continue that effort. And I think it's important that we're electing officials who will hold the line. Senate 181 sits the floor, and we have some really good, strong regulations. In fact, just this week, the town of Firestone, there was a proposal to put 2 well pads with 33 wells, with dozens of homes within the 2,000-foot setback. And I testified at the COGCC hearings multiple times, and just this week, the COGCC denied those applications for the very first time ever, and it was kind of the first test of Senate Bill 181. It was a really great victory, and I think that sets a great precedent for Erie for keeping us safe as well. If you guys have any questions, please come and ask me, but I'm going to be talking about it now.
Thank you.
Just can you hold the mic a little further and talk a little louder? It echoes us.
Yes, okay. This is better? All right, I'll try this. So, as Emily mentioned, the example in Firestone, that's a key case for you guys as a litmus test for what you're really voting for. So what happened in Firestone is that there was an oil and gas operator who was wanting 33 wells in the 2,000-foot setback, which was just prohibited by Senate Bill 181. So they requested a variance. They took it to their planning commission. The planning commissioners for the city of Firestone did not recommend it. So planning commissions, just like in our town, they make recommendations, but they cannot reject applications. So they sent it to the Board of Trustees, the planning commission did, with do not grant this variance. The Board of Trustees in Firestone voted 6-1 to grant it anyway. So it went from there to COGCC, which is the state body that actually regulates the actual permit that gets granted. COGCC denied that. The reason that the trustees, the Board of Trustees in Firestone wanted to grant that waiver was because they really wanted to get the revenue that was going to be generated off of those 33 wells in their town. There was also a land exchange deal rent that the town was going to get some land from these pads being granted. So that's an example of where, and this is a relatively new issue to me, and I admittedly haven't been paying as close of attention as I should have for the years I've been here. Been here 13 years. There are no oil and gas operations in my subdivision, thankfully, but there are plenty of newer subdivisions that were built right up next to active oil and gas operations. So as I'm on the campaign trail, I'm meeting families that are having health issues. They're having impacts. They're having property issues due to these operations. And so Senate Bill 181 essentially said, you know, we are learning that these are too close. This is not a safe way to operate. And so they're putting in regulations. I intend to hold the line on those regulations. I intend to hold any commercial operator in town to the regulations that exist. I also do not plan on offering any sort of waiver that might become public safety issues as the city of Firestone.
Mayor.
There you go.
Christiaan and Emily have done a very good job of discussing the legislative end of things. And for the health and safety of Erie, I do think we need to keep oil and gas operations away from our neighborhoods, out of town. And a lot of work has been done on statewide and in our community, other communities, to have setbacks that are appropriate and as far as we can go. And I don't want a board of trustees that's going to undo any of that. So I'm going to probably harp on continuity because I am in favor of what's been done. Oil and gas within Erie talks about, everybody thinks about the supply side. We also need to work on the demand side and not have a society that's focused on where we can get to with an automobile. You know, we pay an RTD tax or property taxes, many of us. But we have one bus stop, two within the city limits, if you count the one by state. We need to work with RTD and maybe get some mass transit in or around Erie so that we can get to Denver. So I think we just need to guide planning to achieve better traffic. It's not focused on getting cars downtown or through town. It's a great station.
All right, so another question related to other resources that are important to the town of Erie regarding water. So the Northern Integrated Supply Project is an important part of Erie's future water supply storage needs. But there are environmental concerns that come into play with any large project like this. So what do you see as the pros and cons of this NISP project?
Are you going to start with me? I approach every leadership table I've ever joined as an eager student. And so I confess that the water rights and water rates and water bills have been sort of just a different language to me. And so I have been doing research to try to understand, and I do understand that Erie was kind of late to the game buying our water rates as far as, like Lafayette, Louisville, and the surrounding municipalities. They got there before we did. And so water rates water was more expensive. And so I also understand that Erie is like the largest stakeholder in this. And so that bodes well for our future growth. And just from that, those water rights alone, that we have those build out potential and we have enough water to see Erie through build out. I know that we're also doing some things like the well that we're building over on Highway 52 to collect water and to just be in a better position. So I think that the town is being very thoughtful and planning for the future. And I think that there's more to do, and I think there's more for me to learn on this, and these guys will have a lot more great information for you. Which way should I go?
Thank you. So as urban sprawl works, you all live here, you're part of it, I'm part of it. Boulder sort of grew towards the east, towards I-25, and Denver has been growing to the north from below. And as the municipalities have grown, they have to purchase their water shares from the various entities. They have to make agreements to be able to reclaim water from the ground. Water is the most precious resource that we have. For those of us from Michigan, natural gas was expensive. To heat your home in the winter was several $100s. But your water bill, being surrounded by the Great Lakes, was extremely cheap. no one thought about how much their water bill really was because it's abundant. Here we have the opposite equation, that the water is not abundant, it's something we have to pay for. As Erie, early on when I was living in Erie, there were agreements we were purchasing into these watersheds, we were purchasing into these agreements. And while our water rights were more expensive than the suburbs that are to the west of us, we bought them later because we grew after we did. Firestone and Tacoma right now have a water crisis. They are having to pay through their nose to try to get water rights to sustain the growth that they're experiencing because they're growing at a very similar pace as we are. The build out for Erie is 50 to 60,000 people in 2040. We currently have enough water rights, enough water shares, if we are good stewards of our water, to be able to support 50,000 of those people based on current calculations. So that's a good position to be in. However, it's never going to be a cheap solution because the resource that we purchase, and then we purchase the it was expensive. We've invested $30 million in infrastructure and water reclamation and water treatment in the last 5 years. That is a very large capital improvement. Some of that was also funded by federal and state grants, so we didn't pay all of it ourselves. And the towns around us, Louisville, Lafayette, all those towns that have older infrastructure, they're going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to upgrade their facilities. So their bill is coming due. I think we're in a very good position to do that. And anytime we have any capital improvement project like this, we need to ensure that we're doing so in a sustainable, intelligent way that doesn't cause public harm.
Remember Flint water.
We're not doing that.
Erie water is something I do know a little bit about because I've delved into financials, the budgets, and the board trustee meeting minutes to learn all I can because it's high on a lot of people's minds. We have very high water rates, and unfortunately that's because we were late to the game. We paid a lot for water rights, we paid a lot for new infrastructure, but we are ahead of the game with respect to neighboring communities. On my website, danprairie.com, and my Facebook page, I have some graphs that address it. If you look at the cost of water rights, they are on an exponential path. It is a precious, precious resource that we cannot waste. And so we need to be good stewards. We need to continue to get and protect our water rights and not waste water. Another reason I want oil and gas not here because they waste a horrendous amount of water, millions of gallons in fracking operations. So we just need to be good stewards and keep on zero-scaping, helping people understand that HOA requirements to have X% of turf in your backyard are not enforceable in the state of Colorado, and protect our water.
Yeah, I'll double down on the statements made by the other candidates and add that there's another way to reduce your water bill is to reduce your usage. And that is a key aspect of the town of Erie's plans in terms of our total water usage between now and build out and really into perpetuity. So one thing I'll say is that the state of Nebraska has just authorized $500 million of infrastructure improvements along waterways in Colorado for them to assert their water rights. Colorado is one of the most, if not the most, legislated state regarding water. Look around here in any open field. It's not lush and green and there aren't a ton of trees. We are in something of an alpine tundra kind of environment here. And it's really time for us as a society to come to grips with that. That it's really important that our per capita water usage in town goes down. The great news is that between our Director of Public Works, Todd Fessenden, our water attorney, Paul Zylis, and Tyler Kessler in our Sustainability Department, they are working together to generate efficiencies about water reuse, about programs where you can call and have the town of Erie come out and evaluate the efficiency of your sprinklers. We have a sod replacement program where we'll pay you $2 a square foot to tear out your sod and replace it with xeriscaping or gardens. We have the Garden in a Box program So all of these things together, in addition to the tiered water rates that are really designed to disincentivize watering a 10,000 square foot lot with bluegrass solid, those are the kind of things that are absolutely key for us to create not only an economically, but an environmentally sustainable Erie.
Thank you, candidates. So our next question will be regarding our divided town. So Erie spans 2 counties, Weld and Boulder. What issues do you foresee having to deal with due to that division? And how would you plan to address that? Up to you. Great.
So we're a town that's united by people but divided by this invisible line down County Line Road. If you go on the Boulder County side of Erie and you go on the Weld County side of Erie, you can't really tell the difference in people. You can't really tell the difference in businesses. You can't tell the difference in services. So we're a lot more alike than we are different. And there are a few issues that have been elevated to become lightning rod issues at the national level, where there's been a difference of opinion between Boulder County and Weld County. At the state level, there are other counties that have differences of opinion that vary from Weld County to their county. And I believe that by and large, our town and our town government, the people within our town, all have the best interest of Erie residents in mind first. And the thing that divided us most recently were COVID protocols and the masks. And we were in a position where the Boulder County Health Department is telling us one thing, the Weld County Department is telling us another thing, and then we as a town have to make a decision as to what's best for the residents here. And so there will be instances where we will have to decide what's best for the residents here. You elect trustees and the mayor to have the best interests of the residents in mind. And I believe that we've done that. Going forward, the entire world shut down because of the pandemic. We were all traumatized by what happened. I personally lost more than 5 family members to COVID. So it was a very real thing. And I would have hated to have been the public officials who had to make a decision on what to do about that. But they did. They rose to the occasion and they made the decision that they felt was best for the people who live here to protect your public health and safety. So going forward, I intend to be the type of leader who really takes into account what is in the best interest of the residents and the businesses that are in town. And I intend to listen to the experts, educate myself, and make the decision with that in mind.
Erie's not as divided as a lot of people would lead us to believe. And I think social media had a lot to do with that. We have some very vocal people, as most communities do, and I just don't think we're in that bad a shape. Yes, we are going to have to listen to different voices as the board of trustees, and we need to do that, and we need to reply and respond with the message that, yeah, we heard you, and here's what we heard from you, and here's why we decided what we decided. Here's why the board chose to go with the more restrictive county's rules. I think that was appropriate. It's easier to enforce. It also communicated that your issues with the county board of health, not with the police department. It didn't have to be as divisive as it was. So I'm just going to listen to people, I'm going to respond appropriately, and I'm going to be kind and not buy into the fear.
Yes, I will loudly echo that sentiment. Please, please, to everybody, be kind. I have attended every single board meeting since I was elected in 2018. It's over 100 consecutive meetings. I think showing up is such an important aspect of being an elected official, and being there and being willing to listen. And I think for me, as a data scientist and an engineer at heart, I really do embrace the scientific principle that when presented with new evidence that may adjust your opinion from something you said previously, then have the grace to change your mind and incorporate that new evidence into your decision making. I've been a trustee for 4 years, and I have learned so much over that time, and I learn something new in every single meeting that I attend. And it really will be my privilege to bring that experience to the board for the next 4 years.
For me, I think addressing divisiveness in town really comes back to just the foundational principle of making sure that people feel safe, seen, heard, and respected. We need to have the courage to be kind. Sometimes it takes a lot of courage to respond in kindness instead of react from anger or fear. And so that's bedrock for me, just making sure that people feel engaged in a kind way, that they feel comfortable and safe enough to be able to share with the town what their needs are, whether it's a business owner or someone in the neighborhood, but making sure that we're engaging with people. And we all come to this table with different experiences, at different angles, with different views, and all are valid, and that's important to remember and recognize. And I echo what Christiaan said and what Justin said about it's really important that we are curious and that we're asking questions, that we're not set in our ways, but that we are ready to learn what's best and what's next.
Thank you. The next question has to do with types of businesses in Erie. We all know the running jokes about, all the dentists we have in town. So one of the things is how can we help attract a diversity of businesses, business types, as well as like diverse business owners, small business, minority-owned businesses, things like that. And how can you help? How do you suggest residents get involved in that process?
There's a lot in there. My priority is to help small businesses. We have some big box stores on the edge in town. I don't use that term because you're right. They're good businesses. They're good to have, but they're big stores. They're shaped like a box. And that's good. That's a good source of sales tax revenue for us. And I want to be able to use that as a strong base. And we have a very strong financial base in Erie, by the way. We're not anywhere near being in any trouble. But I want to use that to help invest in Old Town, invest in town center, and get smaller businesses, make it easier, whether that's through the administrative process, impact fees, permit fees. We need to make it as easy as possible without giving away the whole farm. We're not going to be open the checkbook to all these entrepreneurs. That's not the town's business. But we can encourage them in financial ways to set up shop in here, whether that's through tax increment financing, small grants, like we did through some of the downtown restaurants, whatever we can to really get this together for our unique community from a business perspective.
I could talk for 30 minutes on this topic, easy. I'll try to distill it down. We have in Erie a great economic development department with Julian and Luke. They're doing really great work to attract business into Erie. The Erie Chamber and the Erie Economic Development Council are two other really important aspects to that. We are working very diligently to start up a makerspace in Erie, which is also another area for business incubation. Finally, we've got the town center as a project where we're looking for innovative work-live situations where entrepreneurs, whether it's a yoga studio or an architect or sewing classes or paint and sip, whatever. Hey, we should do that over here one night. Those kind of things, offering anybody, like whatever stage of entrepreneurship that you're in, if you're just a sole proprietor, if you've got 10 employees, if you want to bring 100 people to work in a light industrial facility in Erie, we have the mechanisms in place to support all of those. To answer the diversity question, we established the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board in Erie, and we're looking for them to really give us that guidance about how we can support minority-owned and women-owned businesses to really bring that diversity of opinion and thought and experience to Erie that we all value so much. So I'm really looking forward to that in the very near term. We also are in negotiations again to work with Weld County on establishing a planning area for the Urban Renewal Authority at the Erie Gateway Project, or Erie North as it's being called. That's northwest of I-25 and Erie Parkway. And that's a more like a 10, 20-year kind of a project. But we have those plans in place, and I'm really looking forward in the next 4 years to executing on those plans to bring a diversity of business to Erie.
Yes, I echo everything he just said. And I've been so excited as Christiaan has been sharing some of the plans for Town Center and for the Gateway Project. And actually I got to go see the makerspace last week, and it's such an exciting, really exciting proposition for Erie, and I want to see more of those kinds of things. It's so important that our economic development group is working with our business groups here that we have here in Erie, which are active and really a great resource for the town as far as mentoring businesses, new businesses, getting people help, supporting them, and also I agree with Dan when he said that it should be easy to open a business and run a business here. I agree, and I am interested in seeing ways that we can streamline our processes and make sure that we're supporting people so that we can get things up and running. And yeah, there's so many exciting things ahead for Erie, and I hope we can all just, oh, the Echo, did you guys see that this week? The Echo has bought their building and they have a whole market plan. That looks so exciting. I want to see more of those kinds of things and make sure that the town is being supportive as much as possible.
Thank you. So I've been doing a lot of talking with area mayors of other towns who've had to kind of go through this. How do you know, some of the towns that have large employment centers, some have a lot more small businesses than we do, to talk through how did you attract them? What are they looking for? How are you able to achieve some semblance of success, and what didn't work? What should I avoid doing as a leader for Erie? And one thing that you may know in Erie is, and if you talk to any business owner, they'll share this with you, our price of real estate has just gone up a lot. It's not just houses that have gotten expensive. The place you're sitting in now, like it's probably $60 a square foot, which rivals downtown Denver on commercial real estate cost. And so when you have high real estate costs, you really have to, as a business owner, you have to hit revenue numbers to be able to sustain and pay your staff and make a profit. And so I have, as I talk about the issues on the campaign trail, a very important thing for me is workforce housing. Having a place for the employees to live. Erie has an average home price of anywhere from, depending on HUD, last year said $468,000. A local realtor just posted $650,000 as an average listing. That requires a lot of money to be able to purchase. And if you're if you're a manager of a small business, not every business owner manages their own business. They want to hire staff to be able to manage it, so they're not buying themselves a job, which I can appreciate. And so if your staff can't afford to live in town, and unemployment is 3.8% nationally, you're going to pass a dozen or so jobs on your commute from your affordable house to that business. So what happens in terms of economic development, and some of the more salient points were hit on earlier, our economic development department is a resource for these businesses. But if the businesses cannot support their full operating hours, they're missing opportunities to make sales. They can't make sales, they can't make revenue. They can't make revenue, they go out of business, and then we have a failed of the economy here in town.
Thank you, everyone. We're at the top of the hour, so we'll take a quick 5-minute break for you guys to get refreshed or anything. We'll come back in 5 minutes. So the next question kind of plays off the other one that's kind of brushed over, but how do you suggest residents get involved in attracting, diverse businesses, both of type and of ownership?
So part, I think, is that we can use CARES funding and Build Back Better funding. There are also some programs that have been put forth by the state. There's been a flurry of legislation and bills that have been introduced in the last weeks to address not only the overall economic issues that we're seeing in Colorado, but making sure that as we recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we're doing so in a just and equitable way. How can residents get involved? That I think it's a matter of encouraging anyone who doesn't identify as a cis straight male to go ahead and start a business in Erie. And I think in particular that we've welcomed a new planning director into town. Sarah Namella came to us from the city of Westminster, and we're really looking forward to getting those kind of things along with the DE&I advisory board, that we are building back to a strong Erie that represents the diversity that we already have in town that we want to see in our community.
Yeah, we have such a strong community of artists and thinkers in Erie, and I think that we can support them and make sure that they have access to things like the planning department, make sure that we're engaging with them. And we have a lot of folks who run businesses out of their homes, connecting with them in meaningful ways. I think that's a really great question. How can the town do a better job of engaging residents and making sure that we're encouraging them and supporting them as they are wanting to start or support diverse businesses? I think that there is an engagement opportunity there that I would like to see the town be able to step into through the DEI board, advisory board, and through the planning department.
Thank you. So I own a couple of small businesses in town that I operate from my home. And as an entrepreneur, you often look for what gap you can fill, and then you are able to make a living, you're able to generate revenue, you're able to offer goods and services in exchange for money. When we are marketing the town to the big businesses that we're trying to attract on the perimeter, we do metrics on how much revenue is lost to surrounding communities. $463 million a year are paid to our surrounding communities for goods and services. And so the thing that residents can do is when you're thinking of going out to dinner, when you're thinking of finishing your basement, when you're thinking of doing something that requires you to spend even a small amount of money, we want the businesses that are in Erie to be top of mind. We want you to think about the local businesses and the local business owners and try to recirculate your income, your revenue in town first. We are not saying we're going to build a fence around Erie and you can't leave, you can't go enjoy other surrounding communities at all. But we are saying that we want you to shop small. We want you to think home first. We want you to talk to your friends about Erie. We want people to talk about Erie the way that we used to talk about going to hang out in Louisville, going to hang out on Pearl Street in Boulder. We want people from surrounding communities to come and spend their money in town and support these small businesses. Just today, I've been in 3 small businesses and I've been able to talk to the owner of the businesses. These are people who are just like you, who are putting their heart and soul into their businesses. And the only way they're going to make it go of it is if you support them, if we support them. And so, as an elected official, they already have my commitment that I support them. They also need the revenue that comes from the citizens, and that's how we can work together to keep Erie moving forward.
I think we need to generate an environment, and we can help do this, where residents understand that it's a participatory government. We're not a distinct distant board, a distant town staff that simply pushing neighbors and addressing what comes to us. That we need to hear the voices of people. We need to know what is needed. We all hate and are disappointed when businesses close. We've got some long-standing businesses close. I don't really know why. What could we have done? Did anyone come to the town and ask for something? Not that they have to come knock on the doors, but we need to be receptive to residents. Some of the best information I've gotten has been knocking on doors in Erie Village, Old Town, and Collier's Hill. This election, learning about the pottery business that love to do business, have their doors open during town events. Trying to open a school across the highway, not in Erie, but I'd love for Erie to be a part of it. But we need to know this stuff, and just making residents understand that it needs to be a place for government to make that happen.
The next question we have is regarding LGBTQ community, because we do have LGBTQ community in Erie. So what will you as elected officials do to support that community and for their rights and protection in town?
This is so important and comes back to my foundational ways that we can move the community forward is making sure that we are building a culture in Erie where people feel safe, seen, heard, and respected. And I'm encouraged by things that the town has recently put into place with the DEI board and just making sure that we are thinking in a forward manner. I also think there are ways, that the community has come together and shown us as a town that this is important to our community as well, with the pride flags at the town and through pride parades, and this is something, that we need to be listening to the community in Erie and realizing that the town needs to be supporting this, and I'm so proud that the town, under Christiaan's direction, flew pride flags last year. That was amazing. It's so important for everyone, for people to see representation, to feel represented, and I'm happy to be able to work with the DEI board and understand what's next, what more can we do to support this community.
Thank you. So I think that to points that Emily made in terms of making people feel welcome and included and part of a community, it's important for us to celebrate our differences and to listen and learn from one another. And many who don't have an understanding of the life experience of someone else can often take for granted the experience that they may be going through in just being who they are. LGBTQIA people are people first. There are instances in town where children, even adults in town, are being targeted for their way of life and who they are or how they identify. And that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable in any community. And I believe that in Erie we've done a really good job of listening to the experiences that people have, to responding to the needs of others, to educating ourselves and embracing our community together. And so organizations like BBN Neighbors, there's several other area organizations that have been working in the schools, and I commit to partnering with those organizations to be able to create outlets for safe community, for accepting community, so that we don't have issues where children, for example, are being targeted, persecuted, bullied in school and not having any place to turn. We have teens in town who are being bullied, who are being targeted because of how they identify or because of the life experience that they are going through or that they have. And that is leading to crisis where youth are looking to harm themselves and they feel like they don't have any place to go. So as the adults in the room, it is our job to curb that behavior, to set positive examples, to share life experiences with one another and celebrate those differences and embrace one another to create community, because that's what community looks like.
I guess it saddens me that, you know, we have to even consider this. I have friends and family in the LGBT community, and so I see the impact of bullying and hate, and we just, as others have said, we need to celebrate differences. We need to normalize acceptance, normalize inclusion, and ostracize hate, and be kind. And, you know, we need to, unfortunately, we do need to continue the DEI types of programs, just like my workplace does. I look forward to the day where that's not necessary. So just be kind and promote kindness.
So as Emily mentioned, last year I was able to write and read the Pride Month proclamation, and for the first time in Erie's history, we raised pride flags for Pride Month in town. This year for Pride, we're going to actually, for a time, we're going to shut down Bridge Street and have an amazing event with food trucks and all sorts of other fun things. As a member of the LGBTQ community myself, this is incredibly important to me. I am working with PFLAG Broomfield to set up a PFLAG chapter for Erie. And I'm proud to have the endorsements of Representative Brianna Titone, Broomfield Mayor Guyleen Castriata, and former Lafayette Mayor Jamie Harkins. That LGBTQ issues are incredibly important to me. Representation matters. So I'm really looking forward that we may have an opportunity here on April 5th to elect the most diverse board of trustees that Erie's ever seen.
So there's been a lot of talk lately about crime in Erie and how things have been getting worse. What is your view on the current situation of crime in Erie? Is there a concern? How will you address the instances that we've seen as you were elected?
So, part of my local community service outside of being Scoutmaster and Nightingale or being a youth mentor down in Denver, started around working with our town's government and our police department at their request to review police directives and to really get to know what the police department's challenges are, what their work processes are, and to provide feedback from the viewpoint of the public. So I, along with other volunteers in the town, went through all of the police directives, and we were really looking for places where the directives were either unclear, ambiguous, maybe exposed either the officers who were executing those directives or the town to any sort of liability in their decision-making as they're going through their day and doing their job. And we didn't find any gaps really in how those were being done, which is an excellent sign of the police force that we have. Our police force does an excellent job. However, we learned a bit about how they do their job and some of the things that they're challenged to provide services for. And so from that, we were able to expand the co-responder program, which is a mental health service where we can provide support to people who may be in crisis instead of criminalizing behavior such as homelessness or addiction or mental health, when people have mental health issues. And so I believe that we need more services in town. I don't believe that we have a rampant crime issue in town. The numbers of crimes in Erie have increased because the town has essentially tripled in the last 10 years in size. Crime per capita is down. The annual police report just came out. It gave you a report on all the types of crime that happened in Erie, and it is mostly petty crimes of opportunity. If you live in a subdivision in Erie, you probably have a half dozen Amazon trucks coming through your neighborhood every day, and they leave packages. that creates crime of opportunity. So we do have petty crime theft that's happening. We do have, there are car theft is on the rise across the country, and so we do have crimes of opportunity where cars may be left unlocked. People use that as a target of opportunity. And so those issues are happening. We do have crime with an excellent police force that are addressing it. I am not concerned about the safety of Erie. I intend to continue to keep going.
To echo Justin's comments, we have a very safe community. I have a teenage son, teenage daughter, which is right now. I have no problem with walking across the line and being out at night. We have a very caring and qualified police department. In high school, my daughter was sometimes at weekend parties, not drinking yourself, but police raided some of those parties. And they called me and asked me if I was okay for her after curfew to drive home. And I said, yes, that's fine. And she did so. And as Justin mentioned, not all numbers are up because our population, per capita crime is down. And that's a tribute to the police department. We have many neighborhoods that are easily accessible from arterial roads, easy access up to the highway. We have to pay attention to that and make sure that we're monitoring that situation. But I have such full confidence in Chief Stewart and her staff. A very diverse force, which is important in a town that is working on that itself. So I'm very happy with the safety here.
I will echo Dan's statement about our confidence in Police Chief Stewart. She has done an amazing job in a very difficult market to attract police officers to the town of Erie. That has been an amazing effort and is something that she doesn't nearly talk about enough. As a data scientist myself, what I really want to encourage folks that are here today and maybe listening online later, that when you look at crime statistics for Erie, please be very careful about where those statistics are being quoted from. That 2020 was the worst year for crime in quite some time, and it is almost entirely to blame on COVID-19 pandemic. Please look at the police annual report that summarizes all of 2021 and shows, as Justin mentioned, a reduction in most categories of crime. The one area where we are still seeing an increase in crime is vehicular thefts. And that's largely because Colorado is the #1 state in the union for vehicular thefts right now. It is a real big problem, and the police can do their part, but we as a community have to be vigilant. So it's a matter of removing valuables from your car. It's locking your car doors. It's having a motion sensor light that points down your driveway. It's if you walk your dog at night, just pay attention and be a part of your community. And those are the kind of things that we can do to protect ourselves from those issues of property crime. But really, overall, the best way to reduce crime is to ensure that everybody in the community has a thriving wage. We talk a lot about a living wage at $15 an hour, but what we really need to do is we need to go to a thriving wage of $20 an hour and more, so that folks don't need to resort to crime in order to make a rent payment or to afford food. So those are the kind of things that I, as a representative for Erie, will be advocating for, not only at the state but the federal level, for our elected officials there to advocate on our behalf.
I agree that Erie is a really safe place to live, and we are not immune to crime. We absolutely have car break-ins and crimes of opportunity, as Justin mentioned. But I've heard from Chief Stewart herself that the town is very responsive to the police department's needs, and it's my intention to continue that and to make sure that the police department has the resources they need to continue to make Erie a safe place for residents.
Another side of inclusion and acceptance is being inclusive and accepting of people who may be socially, politically, religiously opposed to you. How do you plan to deal with those residents of Erie and work with them?
Here we go on that kindness thing again. Just to show everybody respect. One of my, several of my best friends are right behind, probably from our people in the town, but he's very knowledgeable and I respect him greatly. He's in law enforcement, and we hang out. We don't talk politics per se, we talk social issues a lot, and we just do so, and with my other friends as well. We speak respectfully. I try to do that no matter what I'm talking to. I'm not going to berate somebody because they have differences of opinion.
I'll echo the be kind sentiment. That really is so important, and it's showing up, it's being willing to listen and incorporate somebody else's life experience into your own as you sit on the dais and make decisions for the entirety of the town. It's really one of the most difficult balancing acts that you have as an elected official, to listen to public comment and to hear presentations from a developer or from the town attorney who's advocating for updates to our code, whatever the case may be, and to then not only do what it seems like the majority of people want, but to put that into contrast with what's right, and to do those things that really end up being right for those that may be underrepresented or misrepresented in town. I had a meeting in the back room there a couple of weeks ago with somebody who would be very much on the other side. I hate using that terminology, but we left that meeting with a mutual respect for one another. That yes, we have differences of opinion, but each of us were willing to come to the table and listen and actually hear. And for me, it goes back to that scientific principle of willing to incorporate new evidence into your decision making.
Dr. Brene Brown says that it's really hard to hate someone when you're leaning in and face to face with them, and I think that's true. And hate is a strong word, but in the political climate of the last several years, I think it's been really easy to justify actions, I guess, and some words that have been said online. But when we're in person and we realize that we're all neighbors and we are all coming to the table from different angles with different perspectives, and people feel safe, heard, and valued and respected, then I think that we can engage in a way that just makes sense. We need to get back to treating each other, just respecting our humanity and respecting our differences of opinions and differences of experiences instead of being offended by them. And it's bedrock for me to make sure that people feel that they can engage in a way that it's safe for them to share their opinions. And I hope that I will be met with the same respect, though I know sometimes that it's charged and people feel really emotional or passionate about one thing or another. I've been in the town hall sometimes when people are really angry. And I think it's important as leaders to lean in and understand what the pain point is under that anger rather than reacting to it. And so that'll be really important to me.
Thank you. I think that at the national level, the tribalism that has developed in our nation's politics is not only divisive, it's dangerous. And I think that when you think of local politics as a nonpartisan race, when you think about what things we're considering as board of trustees, or what I would be considering as your mayor, it's really about the best interest of what happens in town. And I am a strong believer that the people who move to Erie often move here for common reasons. We like the locality, proximity, without being in the big cities, we're close enough that we can access it. And so we are much more alike than we are different. And I think that if you approach people with a common set of respect, you represent your values, you're willing to not only share your views and life experience with them, you're willing to listen and really care about what they have to say and what their experiences are. That's how you build mutual respect and community. I have relationships with people that span my entire time here in town, and we have a very wide difference of opinions on politics, specifically on national politics. And we have conversations for hours on end about national issues that may be going on or localized issues that may be going on, and they are never heated arguments. They're very good conversations that are insightful. I provide my insight, I listen to theirs, and I try to find the common ground. That's the type of leader that I've been my entire life. That is how I approach this position. That's how I approach being a trustee. I will listen, and there's often there's a thread of there's truth in everyone's experience. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion and their own experience. Sharing it, finding common ground is the way to get to some sort of compromise, if not agreement.
So the situation that we're seeing in Europe right now with Ukraine, that's brought a big argument that's often stated for bringing, for responsible gun ownership for citizens. Are you in support of responsible firearm ownership and safety training?
Very much so. As a responsible gun owner myself, my guns are secured in a safe that my children cannot access. And I think that is something that every responsible gun owner owes not only themselves, their family, but the community in which they live. Gun ownership is a fundamental right in this country, as confirmed by the Constitution. Wouldn't stay in the way of that. But for example, a couple of years ago, we as a Board of Trustees made the policy decision at the behest of the police chief to disallow open carry in town-owned facilities. And that's something that I supported at the direction of the police chief, and I think has made our community safer.
Yes, I think responsible gun ownership is the only kind of gun ownership that should be allowed. I don't feel like that's controversial. So several years ago, after the Parkland shooting, I actually joined Moms Demand Action, which is a group that lobbies for common sense gun laws. And as I have been involved with that group, it's been a really great education for me just to understand more about gun ownership and the laws and the loopholes and things. And so, yes, I think that responsible gun ownership includes education, it includes safe storage, includes background checks and making sure that they're inaccessible to kids and to people who should be able to get to them. And so, yeah, I'm all for responsible gun ownership.
So, many may not know, but I am a licensed federal firearms licensee. What that means is I conduct background checks on behalf of the ATF to ensure that when people are taking possession of firearms, they pass a background check. I strongly believe in the Second Amendment. I strongly believe in responsible gun ownership. I strongly believe that if you're going to have a gun in your home, it needs to be safe and secure. So that if someone breaks into your home, they're not taking it and selling it on Snapchat, which is happening in Denver now. I also believe that if you have children in your home, your firearm should be secure. So if they're not treating them as toys, they understand to respect every firearm as if it were their. So when it comes to the gun laws that we have, I believe that they should be applied. I believe that common sense gun laws make sense. I would consider myself a much more educated gun ownership advocate than the average person, given part of my industry. And I believe that some of the laws that we have don't make sense, but yet I believe that they should be enforced. I believe there are some loopholes that still exist that probably should be closed. There are some devices that probably don't have practical use, but I believe that as long as they're legal, they have the right to own them. And so I'm an advocate, and Being Better Neighbors actually hosted an event just recently where they gave away gun safes to parents through the police department. And you may not know, not to scare you, but there are 31 missing firearms in Erie right now that were stolen from cars in the last few years. Unrecovered handguns right now. So that's an example of how, if you're going to be a gun owner, you have to be responsible. You have to keep in mind that not everyone respects your firearm like you would. Don't tuck it under your seat when you go in Walgreens. Lock it away. You need to make sure that your gun is under your control at all times. And so I believe in the Second Amendment. However, I don't believe in the Second Amendment any more or less than any other amendment.
I'm fine with responsible gun ownership. I'm fine with common sense gun laws. There's no reason to have open carry allowed in town hall. Responsible ownership with restricted access, proper training is paramount, and that's all.
So going back a little bit to the question about businesses in town. What can you do as trustees and mayor to help with rising costs of rent for businesses, especially on Bridge Street, and to help attract businesses there?
Me first? So this is a really good question because as property values are rising, rents are rising as well. And Justin pointed out earlier that businesses have to be staffed and open and bringing in the money to be able to afford the rising costs. I will be curious about ways that the town can step in to help these businesses, because rising property values is great, right? We don't, want to get in the way of that, but how do we support businesses? How can we support them as they're trying to meet their rising costs? I do think one way is by making sure that we can make sure their doors stay open, and that means supporting their workforce and making sure that we have workforce housing in Erie, that they can afford to live here and be able to work here. So I think that's one thing. I think there's things like grants where the town reinvested right into Old Town. Businesses were able to apply for grants, and then the town matched the money that they were putting into their own businesses to improve. I'd like to see more things like that. We need to get creative to support businesses, and we need to make sure that it's easy and profitable to operate in Erie so that we can be competitive among other municipalities.
Thank you. So there have been, it started long before COVID, I believe. It was more prevalent during COVID. There were some grants, capital improvement grants, matching grants that were granted to local businesses. Paribi put their rooftop patio on, if you've been to the heated patio. That was a partnership with the town. If you see the black canvas kind of surround on the birdhouse, where they expanded their seating to the north, and then they put the rooftop patio on, that was a capital improvement partnership with the town. The construction of the building you're sitting in right now, that was a tax increment finance partnership where the owner himself told me a couple weeks ago he would not have been able to build this building if it were not for that TIF funding. So there are ways that we can reinvest in our town. I think I talked about this a little earlier. The retail that we're getting on the perimeter of town has been an economic engine for us to be able to offer more and more of that. I think we ought to turn that up a little bit to reduce the payroll for small business owners who are cashing in their 401ks or their retirement to start businesses. We don't want them to lurch out onto the ledge and then fall off. We have to support them. So I'm a big fan of the URAs, the economic redevelopment efforts that we're attempting to do in town. This park right behind you, that's a $3+ million renovation to Cold Creek Park. There's going to be 90 parking spots. They're going to be on the south end. The idea is to make that a destination. That is going to be an attraction for all of these businesses here. that will serve to increase their traffic and increase their revenue. So I think that creative partnerships like that to get business owners to invest capital into the town, become owners if they can of their property, because the property values are only going to keep rising. Those are ways that we can partner together to make for better, more profitable businesses.
Like was already said, we need to make it easier and less expensive for businesses to start up. The town should not be profiting from businesses being set up and buildings being built. Yes, we have to fund our infrastructure, and there are appropriate operating costs that we need to cut. But we need to look around at other communities. Businesses want our business. Businesses want our customers. So we need to make sure that businesses that want our customers are doing it in Erie and not Lafayette or Firestone or surrounding communities. And if that means adjusting our fees, okay, let's look at that. I'm not promising, let's look at it. URAs, tip financing, whatever it takes to lower entrance costs ongoing, we need to have a good business plan. And that's something, but we can help get it going.
So just as with the residential market, the commercial market for space in Erie is very tight. It's difficult to find open space to have a retail or a business where you've got folks coming into work. What this really echoes for me, or underscores, is the purpose of the Board of Trustees. We're not meant to supervise the minutiae of the day-to-day working of the town. We're supposed to be the dreamers and the planners, and town center as an economic driver with live-work situations. The Airport Economic Advisory Board that we set up last year as an important way to revitalize the economy that is quite strong in the airport. But then how can we double down? How can we really take advantage of that unique asset of the town and do something interesting with it? And then looking farther forward to the Erie Gateway project, how can we ensure that there's going to be inventory for business in the coming decades at the really, really important I-25 corridor there? How can we integrate multimodal transportation? We're advocating very strongly for RTD to extend the N line that currently ends at 136 in Colorado and actually bring it through Erie Gateway. So that will become a transportation hub in the next 10 or 20 years. All of these things work together to expand the inventory of commercial space to then match that supply-demand curve as best we can to keep those rents as low as possible.
Thank you. I think we'll end with a short question regarding your campaigns and finances. Have any of you accepted any sort of financing from large special interest group, PACs, oil and gas, any of those?
So 100% of the financing to my campaign have come from individuals. No special interests, no grants, none of that.
Is it okay if you guys say?
No.
No, I've never seen any funding of whatsoever.
I think that concludes our time to go forward. All right, one more. I think this one. Actually, this one is pretty important.
This is the
Yeah, I've heard it as
encore,
one of the
right?
big
This is
concerns.
the encore. It's the encore. Coming back.
How will you protect Old Town as a neighborhood? How will you represent them since they seem to get, overlooked a lot?
Amen. Well, one of the best ways for the whole town to be protected is for them to protect themselves by voting in home rule and getting on the charter commission and setting up districts that wards that require a representative from that district, where they're not all at large, and they can have a seat at the table. Otherwise, I think other objectives that I've talked about, bringing small businesses down here and increasing town events so that we get foot traffic down here for Old Town businesses is very important. I think that will help retain the character and not allow them to be overrun by perhaps other big business interests. So I think giving them a seat at the table and listening to them and keep knocking on doors.
Yep, I'll echo that, and it's so important to be engaged with the residents of Old Town. The whole Coal Creek Park redevelopment plan initially had a vehicular bridge that was going to cross Moffett and Colliers Hill. And Bill Gibb and I, as trustees, really engaged with the community here and heard very loudly that the residents here did not want that additional traffic down Moffett. We talked then about, hey, let's move the whole schmear up to Cheeseman because there's a bridge already there, and no, that didn't want to do that either. It's like, hey, we've got County Road 1.5. Why don't you just come in past the dog park and head down Briggs? So the current plans there are to have a pedestrian bridge that connects Colliers Hill to Old Town. And that means that when we have those large events at Coal Creek Park, once it's done, that we're not going to encourage a whole bunch of new cars to come into town, that we're really working on that multimodal aspect of encouraging folks to walk or bike or maybe one day bring golf cart downtown. We've heard a proposal from Baer to bring scooters into Old Town. We'll see what that turns into. But it's been so important for me. I grew up living 20 minutes outside of a town of 2,000 people in the northern wilds of Canada. Old Town Erie holds a very, very special place in my heart. I admire the work of the Historical Preservation Advisory Board. Historical landmarking of places around Old Town is so absolutely critical. That TIF financing has been a real boon for Briggs, but with the Coal Creek Park, we're looking to do the same down Cattell and really make sure that folks that live in Old Town and have done so for decades can continue to enjoy the life that they've come to expect out of Erie.
So my family and I wandered through the luminaries. My son actually made a luminary. A show of hands, did anybody get to go to the Hope and Gratitude event? Yes, that was so amazing. The trees were sparkling overhead and families were spilling out of the restaurants. And we were meandering through looking at all the luminaries, and I just had this warm sense of pride that this is our home. And we've been knocking on doors in Old Town the last couple of weeks, and people have been so generous on their front porches talking with us, and I recognize that sense of pride that this is our home. And they've been here a lot longer than I have, and the stories that we've heard have been sometimes just hilarious and sometimes frustrating, and they felt left behind. Other times they are talking about growth in town and how they love having paved streets, which is so funny. It was such a great improvement. And they love being able to walk to dinner on Briggs, and also they're concerned about growth. All of them were happy to hear that there would be parking included in the Coal Creek upgrades. That way we're not parking on their neighborhood streets. But I recognize that sense of pride, that sense of place, and it would be really important to me as a trustee to maintain that, to continue to invest in Old Town, but to really embrace our character and charm and in our Old Town residents.
Thank you. So as was said earlier, I've learned a lot more about Old Town just in the last couple of weeks that I've known for 13 years living here by talking to people that are 40, 50 who are residents of Erie. And I agree wholeheartedly with the suggestion that once a home rule commission comes into being, having guaranteed representation for the various districts of town, or the various areas of town is imperative, because you know best what's good for your neighborhood if you live in Old Town. If If you operate a business in Old Town, you know what's best for you. And I'm not a fan of an idea that we are going to somehow exploit Old Town for our gain, economic gain as a town. That would be the worst possible thing we could do. Old Town is a neighborhood first, and it has a business district in it. We have an Old Town with the Urban Renewal Authority that is a way for us to reinvest in the community and not being impactful or detrimental to those who live and work down here. Is being a partner and recognizing and respecting that, having industrial traffic on residential streets is not good for residents. Driving up the cost of the homes in what was once the most affordable place in Erie, that's not good for the residents here. We have to get better about code enforcement, I think, in Old Town, in the sense that they feel forgotten because they feel like services aren't being provided. Old Town, I don't know how you feel about them, but they don't have an HOA. They don't have someone that's advocating for keeping the sidewalks shoveled, or making sure that people are picking up after their animals, or people are keeping their homes or their yards well kept. And so in Old Town, it's really up to one another, our town, to really reach out to our police department, who actually has that responsibility to enforce ordinances and to respond to those types of complaints. I do not want the residents of Old Town to be driven out by the growth. I would like the residents to be a part of that growth, and I would like to hear it. If you feel like that's not the case, we want that feedback, because we can't make decisions if we're not hearing how you feel.
And as long as there's no more.
We have the encore again.
I'd like to say thank you to the candidates for taking time out of your campaign to come visit. Thank you to the residents, and we hope everyone learned something and learned something about our candidates.
And
Thank you very much.
to Ash and Craig for facilitating.